Well, good morning, everybody. This is Danny back from Deep South Homestead. I wanted to take an opportunity to walk around the homestead. I want to show you guys some of the things that's actually transpiring here as far as things that are growing. It's amazing how that so far this year, the growing season has been astronomical here. Things are fruiting like crazy. Things are growing like crazy. I mean, everything we have is done leafed out. The weather's been absolutely perfect so far. The only issue is we've got some weather coming our way that could potentially change it all. Now, one of the first things I want to show you is a tree here behind me. Now, this is a peach tree. I worked with this peach when it was just a little tiny thing. I planted a seed and grew this peach, and have worked with this tree to create and make it what I want it to be. And it has turned out to be a white peach that is very large, and it maintains its firmness. It never gets soft. It's a fantastic peach for putting in the freezer and taking back out, for canning, making pies. It never goes soft, and that's one thing I like, a crunchy peach. Well, this tree, because of the fact that it was a seedling and I worked with it and created it up kind of to what it is today, bred it up, it actually blooms very early. And the first couple of years we had it where it was blooming, we got some mild winters, and Wanda and I were able to harvest some peaches off of it. But for the last 3 to 4 years, the freeze every year now, since we're headed toward the minimum, the freeze is getting it. Well, this year, it is loaded with peaches again. I could have cut this tree down when I built the shed, but I chose not to because it's just a tree that that means a lot to us, you know, because we help create and bring this tree up. And now that it's got these peaches on it, the weather could change that again, and we're just hoping that it doesn't. And I can show you, these little peaches are on the limb. Try not to damage anything here. You got one right here. There's a little peach right here. You know, there's one right over here. Get around where maybe you can see it there. Right there. Just beautiful little peaches. And there's several of them on the little trees left. I trimmed it back pretty hard, and there's peaches all over it. So, this isn't the only one. We're going to take you around and show you a lot of our fruit trees and what's actually transpiring here at Deep South Homestead. Okay, we're here at our plum tree, one of our plum trees. We actually have several plum trees. Usually every year, the weather knocks the plums off. It just destroys them. And this year so far, I mean, you know, we've got cute little old plums hanging on the tree here. There's one right there. And you know, you go up through the tree here, here's another one, and then you go over, there's a one over there. And I can come through the tree here and show you there's one on the end of a limb out there. You know, but yet, even though we have this, this does not necessarily mean we're going to have plums this year. That's the drawback to this. So many people are sitting back going, well, I'm planting all these fruit trees, or I'm planting these grapevines, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. God, this tree's been here for, I don't even know how many years this tree's been here, probably at least 6. And it blooms out every year, but then we'll get a free cold spell in here and knocks all the plums off of it, and it's gone. And it's designed for this area. So, and that's not the only one. We have another one sitting right here beside it. This is a tree that's actually a wild plum, and then I grafted the tame plum onto it. We've never gotten a plum off of this tree. This is what happens every year. The blooms come on, and you'll see the little plum will form like that, and then it just falls off. And it is a young tree. It's only just a few years old, so it maybe have to need, you know, a few more years going before it actually does any good. But guys, right now, nature, I'm afraid, has been fooled, because we've got some really chilly weather coming, and I'm afraid that because of that, we could see some severe damage to our trees. So I'm hoping and praying not, but You know, this isn't the only thing. Now, if I move around to the side here, we've got potatoes growing here. These potatoes are up, oh, they're up a good foot to 14 to 16 inches tall. And they're just sitting here just as pretty and green as they can be. This is a variety over there we're trying, and it's not doing too well because of, you know, some varieties just don't do. And then in the background, you can see the onions, but I want to show you some problems we're having with the onions. When you live in the Deep South and you use this row cover, or ground cover should I call it, and we punch these holes in it, and we plant our onions, you see what happens here? This is fire ants. The fire, look at the eggs in that. Look how many eggs there are in that right there. This is the problem that we face here in the Deep South. We cannot come here and look at the eggs. You can't poison them, because if you do, then your onions is underneath it. And they'll go down this thing in every one of these holes, and they'll eventually try to build a bed up under every one of them. The only way I found so far to combat this is to come in and punch a hole down in there and put a handful of fertilizer in it. And for whatever reason, they don't like the fertilizer and they'll move. And guys, this is something that we battle here continually. Just because I have these beautiful onions standing down here, that does not mean I'm going to get an onion this year. The fire ants, the weather could destroy it all. Another thing, our scuppernongs have begun to leaf out here because of the weather that we've been having. And guys, this doesn't mean anything. We could get a freak cold spell in here and it could knock every one of these leaves off of here, and it would have to start completely all over again, which would put us way back on our harvest this year. Because if you actually take time and you come up here and you really look, if I was to pull these back right there, you see that right down in there? That is the little tiny scuppernongs that's beginning to form and come on this everywhere. They're in the tops of all of these leaves. And if we get a freak cold spell in here and it happens to freeze, this whole crop will be knocked back probably a month. This vine here is probably 100 and something feet long, and it can have fruit hanging everywhere. But yet that doesn't mean I'm going to harvest anything, because people don't take into consideration when they plant things like grapes or scuppernongs or muscadines, fruit trees, all this kind of stuff. You can wake up one morning and come out, because it's happened to Wanda and me. You can come out here and you can say, whoa, what a beautiful harvest we're going to have. And come out right when they're ready, and they're all gone, because overnight the coons, the possums, rats, wild animals, birds, everything comes in and they'll clean them up overnight. So you can't always count on it. The wildlife, you've got to eradicate the wildlife if you're going to have things like this to be able to put up and to store. We're at our pear trees here beside our chicken pen. And this one tree here now has got up to probably 25 feet high up yonder. This tree usually every year is really loaded with pears. You can take and, if I find one of these limbs here, let me see, here's one right here. You just look at how many, you can see them all in the ends of it there. There's pears all on the ends of these limbs, all over this tree. This tree can have literally thousands of pears on it. And every year we usually end up canning everything we want, and then other people come in and get them by the 5-gallon buckets and they go can them. But this is one of our favorite trees here. Now this is a moonglow, but guys, we had one time this winter that our temperatures got down in the low teens, and when it did, it bit this tree back, and now I don't think it has anything on it anywhere. Of course, I've been fooled before and found a few on it, but it doesn't look like I see anything on it anywhere. You know, it's just, and this is our favorite of all of them. And those are the things that make you kind of sad, is when your favorite trees don't actually have anything on them. But now we have what's called a pear right here beside it. This one, this pear tree makes literally thousands of pears every year. I mean, I want you to look at how many, I mean, just look at the limb. It doesn't matter where I grab it. There's pears literally everywhere on this tree. I mean, this tree has literally thousands and thousands of pears on it. It does it every year. But if we get some kind of freak cold spell to come in here and freeze, it could thin this thing down so thin to where we would just probably barely have enough to can. When Wanda and I were first married, this tree was already established here. There was times I would come out here and they would be crows in the trees. The crows would be pecking in the pears. There was times I shot raccoons out of these trees. There were times I had possums in these trees. And you just don't know. I mean, during the middle of the night, when these things start getting ripe, they send off a smell into the air, and the wildlife comes up out of the woods after this fruit. And you've got to really be on your game if you're going to harvest anything. This is one of our brown turkey fig trees here. This is a nice big fig tree. And look, it's already totally leafed out, which is not uncommon for this tree to do this. But if we were to get some kind of freak freeze in here right at the last moment and bite it and burn all these leaves back, it would set this tree back another month. Because Wanda and I's had that happen before. We actually had a beautiful crop of figs on here one year, and we had a late freeze, and when we did, we got absolutely, I think we only picked 2 gallons of figs off this tree that whole year. And normally this tree will produce us anywhere around 25 to 30 something gallons of figs every year. But now, just like a freeze, a drought can do the same thing, because we had one year we had a severe drought here, and a lot of our figs just fell off on the ground. They never got ripe. So you got to take all these things into consideration when you talk about raising your own fruit on your homestead. There's so many things that can transpire and cause you not to harvest anything. And this is one of those things where every bird in the woods all of a sudden will realize that there is something here to eat. All the coons in the woods will realize that there's something here to eat. All the possums will think that there's something here to eat. And you got to really be on your game. That's why now I have probably I think I got 5 or 6 fig trees planted around my property just because I want to be able to harvest something. Okay, this fig tree right here is one that I got from my grandfather. My grandfather had this tree when he was a boy. It is said it's one of the original fig trees that came over from China into this part of the country when they first started bringing figs here. This tree puts figs on probably 3 to 4 times a year, and they make a fig that's as big as a tennis ball. And it's a brown, dark purple fig. And this is one already on here. I mean, and I think that's kind of early this year, but, and they're on the ends of all these limbs up here. If you look on the limbs up there, there's figs up underneath. Here's another one right here. They're just up under here everywhere. Now these first ones like this, a lot of these figs will fall off. And you'll have a few of them that'll actually make it. But this is an old variety, just simply because I know the origin of the rootstock. I don't know a name to the tree. My grandfather told me that it came from one of his family members way back beyond him from China. And I can't tell you anything about it other than that. I know that it makes a wonderful, giant, purple, sweet fig. Behind me here we have a pecan tree. Now remember in one of my previous videos I told you my daddy always told me that when pecan leaves are the size of a mouse's ear, cold weather's over. You don't have to worry about it too much. Well guys, we're going to see if that saying stands true, because I'm going to show you something. This tree normally does not tassel out to make pollen until May, and that's when we usually get a lot of rain. Here we are. This video will come out on the 1st of April. And I want to show you something. Look at this. The pecan leaves are already big as a mouse's ear, and there's already tassels all over it, ready to start pollinating and making little pecans. What that tells me is I'm not going to have any pecans this year. probably, because we've got a big dash of cold weather fixing to plunge down to the south here. Now it may not freeze, but we're gonna be, I've looked at 3 or 4 weather stations, and we're right at 33 degrees. And the wind's gonna be blowing. They're saying that our wind chill is gonna be a lot lower than that. So we're hoping and praying that by having the wind along with the cold, that all the fruit I've showed you so far will be spared from actually having been frozen. And we're down here by the pond now. And guys, this is one of our mulberry trees. We showed you this the other day in a video, and the mulberries were all green, but I want you to look at them. They are now turning a red color. We have a few of them on here that are actually taking on a black tint to them, which means that probably in a week, they'll probably begin to be ready. This is the smaller one of the trees. Right over here beside me is a lot larger one. See a black one. Oh, I see a black one, but I can't get to it.
I see some black.
I see a blackberry.
Oh, they falling. Look at the ground. Oh, right here.
Can you reach it?
Look. Look, 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 look. Ooh.
Oh, it fell to the ground, right on the ground right there.
Where? Is that it?
Guys, this mulberry tree here, the mulberries are already falling on the ground everywhere.
They're not ready.
Because of the wind. We've had so much wind that they're actually beginning to fall on the ground. And Ms. Wanda and I were sitting here looking, and look at this. Probably within another couple of days, these will be ready to pick. What happens tonight is we have a severe weather moving into this area, and if the wind gets up really high, a lot of these mulberries are going to be blowed off onto the ground, and it'll just be a waste. They'll wash out into the pond, and the fish will actually eat them, and we won't get very many of them. This happens quite often. So that's just one of the drawbacks to a mulberry tree. Now I'm going to actually test this. You want the other half of it?
I do.
It's good. And we may even attempt to freeze dry some of these should we get a chance to harvest them, because we don't, guys, we can't make that much jelly, okay? Things like this, if they make, it helps keep some of the birds out of our other fruit trees, and we kind of try to keep enough fruit growing everywhere that there's plenty for us, plenty for the wildlife, you know, and so that we're assured to get some. But now back behind us is our flowering crabapple. Now it has totally finished all of its flowering, which is kind of scary to me, because usually this thing flowers at exactly the same time all of our apple trees are flowering. And our apple trees, we have very few of them that have any blooms on them right now. And this thing is done leafed out, flowered out, and already got the little bloom things on the end of it here. I mean, I don't know how many of them are actually going to have any crab apples on them, because literally when I touch them, the blooms just fall off this year. So I don't know if this thing is going to actually have any crab apples on it this year. I know I see a few little blooms still trying to pop out here, so possibly, I'm looking here, these look like little miniature crab apples right there. There's usually literally thousands of them on here. The birds come and try to get them, and we usually try to keep this tree every year. We planted it, let me say that, because it's a great pollinator for our other apple trees. No matter what variety they are, this thing usually will pollinate over a long period of time, and it pollinates all the apple trees. But it looks like this year it's done pollinated, and the other apple trees have not. So we may not get no apples this year, so we'll have to wait and see. Here we have one of our apple trees. This was an Anna apple that used to bear us bushels of apples every year, but there's a little small woodpecker about that tall that has got into this tree, and he started pecking holes all around on it, and when he did, it started decaying once it started doing that, and it's got lots of decay under it now because these little birds pecked holes all in it everywhere and ruined the bark on it. And now we've been having to cut this tree back a lot, trying to salvage it. It's probably going to end up going back to the stump, having to re-sprout again. But it does have a few blooms popping out on it now. But the other tree has done completely flowered out. And it's possible that maybe the bee will take a few, will be able to pollinate back between the two of them. But then I've got another apple tree right beside me right yonder that I've grafted 3 different varieties onto that one tree. It's just now starting to leaf out. So the timing is off with nature this year here. We realize that. Everything is coming in just a little too early this year. We're afraid we're going to lose it all to some type of a weather system. And hopefully, we have a few right here that maybe a couple of these actually pollinated. Another thing we love about this time of the year here in the Deep South is the azaleas are beginning to bloom. Look at that azalea down by our pump house yonder, guys. That is amazing. I mean, it just, the fluorescent color of it, the beautiful color, just is breathtaking. I mean, we have them, several of them in the front yard up through yonder. We have a pink one, we got white ones, we got red ones. We got these, they're just beautiful. They bring a sense of beauty to a homestead. And right below the azalea bush, you'll see that long mound of dirt here. This was a hugel bed that we actually put in here many, many years ago, and we used to plant our vegetables on it. But as time went on, we decided that we would rather plant our fruit trees on the back side of this hugel bed and let the roots of the trees grow into the hugel bed rather than trying to plant vegetables on it. So we turned it into a swale, actually, and it has worked out fantastic. We have apricots down here that's growing on it. Hopefully one day we're going to be able to harvest our apricots from that. We've got 2 different varieties of apricots, so we're hoping that that's going to work out all right. We have an apple tree here that is just now beginning to leaf out, and hopefully at some point we're going to be able to harvest some apples off of it in the future. And we have a peach tree here that I grew from a seed. This thing blooms really early every year. And this year, guys, it is loaded with peaches. I mean, everywhere you look how beautiful those little peaches are. Last year I harvested quite a few off of it. It done really well. And we're excited this year that it's actually got peaches on it again. And right beside it right here, I planted a seed last year and it came up, and look at the speed that this thing is actually growing. This is just from a seed from a peach. It's a seedling. I have no idea what it will do. I've got to come in here and take everything off of the bottom of it here and reshape it up here and make it into the shape that I want it. But guys, I'm learning in the Deep South that things grown from seeds a lot of times are a lot more hardy than the actual grafted trees are. So, and it's always fun to just to say, hey, I don't know what it's going to end up being. And then beside it here, we have a banana tree. And I saw here beside it's got a little pup coming up. This one will probably here in the near future begin to sprout back out from this top if we don't get some kind of hard weather in here and make it too cold and knock it back. Last year we had a beautiful banana tree here, so this is at the very end of our hugel bed to kind of help control the erosion from the water that rushes down through here. And hopefully this year this is going to make another beautiful banana tree for us. All right, I wanted to bring y'all into the blueberry orchard here. We are beginning, our blueberries have now flowered and we have nice blueberries coming on the trees here. Not as many this year. That temperatures that we had down in the low teens bit the trees back pretty good this year, and a lot of them just are not going to have as many blueberries on them. But now we do have some varieties. This is the Alapaha Blueberry here. It is literally loaded with blueberries, and it is still actually blooming here. I seen this morning it still has blooms all over it. It seems to do very well. Everywhere I look, we have lots and lots. I mean, just look at the blueberries on a limb. How many that there can be. And we're praying that we don't get some kind of cold weather in here at the last minute and knock these few blueberries off that we have here. That's just one tree. Yeah, we have 50 of them. One of our big issues, a lot of people in the last video said, oh my gosh, 50 blueberry trees that produces X number of blueberries per tree. What will you do with all those blueberries? Well, when you live in the Deep South, you have deer who love blueberries. You have birds that come in here by the dozens. There's just no way to keep the birds out. You can't net all these trees, so it's a toss-up between wildlife, weather, and us. There's enough blueberries here for everybody to have a pretty good little stash of blueberries if they all do okay. Well, we're over here at our cold frame. Y'all remember, if you watched our previous videos, we put the sweet potatoes in here. We had red ones over here, white ones over here, and we had red ones over here. And they're beginning to start popping up now. And from this point forward, if we can keep the lids down and keep the ground warm, they're going to start popping up. But the problem we had, I left the lids down the other day and forgot to lift them up during the heat of the day. And this right here is what transpires, guys. When you in the Deep South, you see that right there? Fire ants. They brought every one of their eggs and put them underneath these lids where it was warm at to warm them up. And I can't come in here and poison any of this stuff. And everybody talks about using cornmeal and all this kind of stuff. Guys, this is an imported fire ant. Cornmeal doesn't work. The only thing that works on these is some kind of harsh chemical or gasoline. People talk about mixing 2 fire ant mounds together. I've tried it. No luck whatsoever. The only thing I found that would destroy these things is, like I said, is some kind of extremely harsh chemical or pure straight gasoline. People go, well, you can pour boiling water. You know how much boiling water it would take to kill all the fire ants here? It just isn't feasible. You can't do it. And if I poured boiling water in here, it would destroy any potato crop that's underneath it there. It would just scald it and we would get nothing. So what I'll probably have to do here is just, like I did just then, I irritate these ants. The one thing I've learned about them is the more you disturb them, they don't like that and they will move. So I will come in here today and I will continually take a stick or something and I'll disturb these ants, and they'll probably move from here over to the other side or something and get out of my potatoes here. And that's just what you have to do. You got to learn to work with what's going on. Probably within the next 2 weeks, this whole bed is going to be just filled up with nothing but sweet potato draws. And from that point forward, if the weather I think is warm enough, we're going to try to take them up and get them in the ground. Guys, I'm standing in my potato patch. As you can see here, right now, they are lovely. They are up to the top of my knees here just about. Probably in another few days, they'll be up big. But guys, the one thing I have to worry about is if we get a freeze or a frost or anything like that, it can knock them down. Or if we get hit by an infestation of the potato beetles. Now, we don't have them here right now. Not to say that we won't have them, but for the last several years, me and Wanda has not had the first potato beetle, and we're thankful for that. But guys, the potato beetles can wipe them out overnight, and that's one thing you just don't ever know about. Then when you go to harvest them, if it's too dry, when it comes harvest time, which is about May, what happens is the moisture in the potatoes attracts the imported fire ants, and the potatoes will literally be infested with fire ants, and they'll bite into the skins of them, and it fixes them where they will not last in storage. So you have to end up canning them or doing something with them in order to be able to salvage them. And on the other hand, if it happens to be too wet, then what happens is they will rot in the ground. Now, we have ours up on top of pretty high beds right now, so hopefully we won't have that issue, but you don't know when it comes time for harvesting. If it sets into raining for a week at a time and everything just stays flooded, what happens is the skins on the potatoes will blister, and then they will begin to rot, and it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to be able to save them. You can get a few of them to can or for fresh for a week or two, but after that they usually pretty much just rot. Well guys, I'm up at my English peas now, and to show you how the weather affects things, Last year, Wanda and I went back and looked at our video footage of these actual English peas planted here. They were already up this tall, loaded with blooms and little English peas. This year, they're just barely up. We planted at exactly the same time we planted every year. And what happened was, when we planted, it started raining. And it rained, and then it came that freeze, and it got down into the low teens. And ice spewed up out of the ground everywhere, as y'all seen on one of our videos. And then it turned right back into the 70s and stayed warm for like a week or so, and we saw no activity up here. I came up here and started digging in the ground. Every one of the peas that was in the ground froze in the ground and turned to mush. So we was already a good 2 weeks behind. So we decided to go ahead and do a replant. We replanted, and guys, we've not really had any conducive weather for growing English peas. It turned off in the 80s, and it stayed in the 80s for probably 2 weeks here. And English peas do not like heat, so they did not start off very well. But now that the night times are getting back down in the 50s and 60s and fixing to go into the 40s and possibly 30s for the rest of the week, maybe, just maybe, these are going to pull out and do okay. But the thing that bothers us is there is a period of time with these English peas in the Deep South, right at the point when they begin to start putting on peas, if you get them in at the normal time that we originally had, which means that they should have peas now, right toward their peak of harvest, the powdery mildew, because of humidity here, always hits them and wipes them out within a couple of 3 days. And we're afraid that this year what might happen is by the time they get up to even start to bloom, the powdery mildew may hit them because of our excessive heat that we have and humidity, and it's possible we may not get any English peas this year. So this is the one thing, the reason we document these journeys is so that we will know in the future what to expect if we don't get them in on a particular time. Hopefully this year the weather will cooperate and we'll be able to get them in and we'll be able to harvest them. We normally plant twice this many, but because we had them in the greenhouse this year early in the winter time, we was able to grow them in there and keep a good harvest and store up a bunch of them in the freezer for us to have to eat fresh all through the winter. So we felt like that we didn't need to have as many out this time in order to be able to keep our harvest up where we needed it at. So it may come back and bite us, but we're gonna have to wait and see. Well, a lot of you guys have been asking me about the razzmatazz. Well guys, this is it right here. So far, it is doing really good. I keep it covered. If it's gonna get cold or there's gonna be a bad storm or something like that, I cover it up with this big old black pot to the side here. And so far it's doing good. Now if we got some cold weather coming, I'm gonna be covering it up again to try my best to keep it Cadillacing along as good as I can. Now this is a scuppernong vine here that has been specially bred up to make a scuppernong that is seedless and that you can eat the hull and all when you're eating it. Now the only thing about it is it's not very big. If you've ever eaten fox grapes, you'll kind of understand what it's like. It's more like a fox grape than it is an actual large scuppernong. All right, this is one of the squash that we had growing in the little cups that I had. This is the gold prize squash. This one is outside. It's in the field out here. We have two of them here, one sitting side by side. And as you can see, there is actually little blooms coming on. There's like a little tiny squash down in there. But I also, just for safety reasons, I planted 3 of them in Miss Wanda's high tunnel. Now the ones in the high tunnel are probably 2 to 3 times larger than this one, and the squash is already opened up in full bloom in the high tunnel. Guys, that's the difference between inside a high tunnel and out here where Mother Nature can take its toll on a plant. Out here when it rains, you see how the dirt splatters up on everything in here? This one just gets dirt splattered up on it everywhere because of our sandy soil. And a lot of people will probably tell me, well, you could mulch it and you could stop that. Well, if I mulch anything here, what's going to happen is the fire ants are going to build a bed up on it and they're going to eat my plant off and they're going to kill it. So I can't mulch here. The only option that I have is to put down ground cover. I could do that and they would probably do okay. But we had these that we had to get out very quick, so we brought them up here and put them in the ground as an experiment to see this time of the year, getting one out this early, what was the difference between a high tunnel and outside. Here in front of the house, by my sidewalk, Wanda and I took an endeavor here several years ago. As much as we love the wild huckleberry, they told me that they probably wouldn't transplant very well, but I went around through the woods and I found a bunch of them and tied ribbons on them. And when wintertime come, I dug them up as they were tiny little plants and moved them. And I want you to look at this today. Look at all the huckleberries on here. These trees are literally loaded, and this is just a small one. Lots of these trees in here are actually large. And the thing about a wild huckleberry is that you really don't have to fertilize it. It loves the decomposition of leaves. It loves to grow up under other trees, and around us here we have huge oaks and stuff, and it's growing up under it. It loves that kind of stuff. Guys, this is the one thing that's actually a staple for us here. I mean, because the huckleberry, usually because it's native to our area, usually does very well. But now, the purpose of the whole video today is to let people know and understand that even though here at Deep South Homestead, I just showed you a very small portion of what we have. We have probably 100 more trees than what I showed you. And the reason behind that is this. You can have all that fruit trees around here and you can not harvest anything. You can have weather problems. You can have physical issues that happen right when things are at their peak and not be able to get out there and get your fruit in time. You can have an invasion of wild animals come in and they can wipe out your fruit in a moment's notice. And all it takes is a night or two. An old mama coon with a bunch of her little cats with her can come in and they can wipe a crop out in like 1 or 2 nights. Foxes, coyotes, all these things, birds, all these things could come in and devastate your fruit crops at night. And this thing of just planting one tree of this and one tree of that, you're taking a really big gamble. Unless you're in an area where you can really like put a net over it or something other and you can really control that tree. Because like out where we live out in a rural area and there's lots of wildlife out here, the only way we're able to harvest anything, we learned this years ago, is like apple trees. I've got like probably 25 apple trees. I've probably got 15 peach trees. I've probably got 7 or 8 fig trees. Huckleberry trees, I've probably got 100. Blueberry trees, I've got 50 of them plus what's over at the cabin. You know, pear trees, I've probably got 12 to 15 pear trees. This ensures me that I'm going to probably get enough off of them to be able to have some to can and some to eat. If I just depended on a couple of trees here and there, it probably won't happen, because I've seen times where I only had like 3 pear trees back here and I didn't get nothing, because at night the coons came in, the possums came in, and everybody's like, well, you could have done this or you could have done that. My wife had cancer at the time. I wasn't able to stay out at night and watch everything. I had to take care of her. And for several years, I lost all my fruit off of all my trees, because during the day, if I had to take her to a hospital visit for her chemo or radiation or whatever she was going through, and I would come back, the crows would have done been in the fruit trees and they would have already ate up all my fruit that was in the trees. Just in a couple of days, they cleaned the tree out. My muscadines, I thought for sure one year I was going to have a bumper crop of muscadines. The wild turkeys came in, they cleaned up the muscadines. At night, the mice come up and flying squirrels and stuff like that. cleaned everything up at night. So don't think for one moment that just because you have a few fruit trees that you're going to get anything, because life can throw some serious curves at you. And guys, it's a learning curve. Whenever it comes to harvesting fruit, if it's not a disease, if it's not an insect, if it's not a life-changing event, if it's not a wild animal, the odds are stacked against you. So really, take into consideration all of the obstacles that you're going to face. Plant enough to cover all those obstacles. Because here, I had some of the most beautiful peach trees on the hill back yonder, and the deer came in with their horns and hooked those trees and twisted them up and just threw them over on the ground after they were 4 years old. There was nothing I could do about it. The deer had never messed with them before. They came in one night and destroyed my trees. So now we've learned to take precautions because of all the things that have happened. So guys, I want to take this opportunity to walk you around and show you a little bit about what we do here and a little bit about what we have. If you haven't subscribed to us, hit that subscription button. Hit the notification bell so that when we put a video up, you can get these informational type videos like this. And maybe it will help you in the near future to understand some of the things and the obstacles that are out there in the world that people like Wanda and I here at Deep South Homestead has already experienced. Maybe it will help you to be able to salvage more of your fruit off of your trees and your garden crops and stuff like that. Maybe we can show you some little tidbits that we've learned that will help you guys. So thank you from Deep South Homestead.